Welcome to Pod Save America. I'm John Favreau.
I am Joe American, filling in for John Lovitz until we get done with the Mar-a-Lago part or this grows tiresome.
I'm Tommy Vitor.
I do not understand.
Welcome to Pod Save America.
Why do we think these handsome men are laughing?
On the pod today, we have civil rights activist DeRay McKesson. We're going to talk about the Black Lives Matter movement and organizing and protesting in general. Everyone also tune in on Wednesday, Pod Save the World.
Very special Pod Save the World. I have Ben Rhodes, who was really one of the closest advisors, period, to President Obama for all 8 years. Brilliant guy. We talked about everything under the sun, including his leading of the Cuban negotiations. So it's a very cool episode. Tune in.
He lets it rip, I understand.
He lets it rip.
Outstanding. Also, it is the last day to buy merch, guys.
Yes, cottonbureau.com/crooked. I know this is already tiresome, but once it will be better when we're in the Mar-a-Lago part, and then
It'll be better once people have the context for why you're doing it.
Yeah, it's great.
Oh, for sure.
Just, Also, really quick, everyone, go download the Square Cash app if you haven't already. Because, as you know, it's the official payment app of Crooked Media. Square Cash is the simplest way to pay people back, friends, family, coworkers. Sending and receiving money is totally free and fast, and most payments can be deposited directly to your bank account in just a few seconds.
Very useful for foreign intel people paying off Trump. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, let's just say I get a little extra spending money.
In the Square Cash app, link your debit or credit card, select an amount to send, type in a friend's phone number or email address to complete a payment. They'll get notification they've just received the money. That's it. No gimmicks, just cold hard digital cash. Download the Cash app for iOS or Android today. Okay, guys. I want to start with a national security question for Tommy. Tommy, let's say that you're president and a call comes in that North Korea just launched an intermediate-range ballistic missile in the direction of South Korea. You're at your private club that you're still profiting off of as president. And you're eating dinner with the Japanese prime minister. What do you do? Do you A, go to a secure location and take the call, or B, just grab a cell and start chatting?
Yeah, I think at a bare minimum, maybe you go upstairs to one of the rooms you own. I mean, the North Koreans do this stuff a lot. They tested 20 ballistic missiles in 2016 alone, and they often do it for maximum PR value and to try to get attention. So this is not new, but it's troubling. And I was thinking back to the first time this happened when we were in office. It was April 2009. We were in Prague to deliver a speech about nuclear nonproliferation. The president was. And he was woken up at 4:30 in the morning to get briefed on a missile launch. And what he did then was convene a call with the Secretary of State, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, his National Security Advisor, Secretary of Defense, right? And then Hillary got working, and she talked to the South Koreans, the Russians, the Chinese, the Japanese to start the process of coordinating on sanctions. So obviously we didn't solve the North Korea problem that day or any day after, but that's kind of the play you run in response to this sort of provocative act. Now, Trump, let's set aside the irony of him running an entire election based on Hillary's email security, right? Trump and his goons running around trying to manage this thing in an unsecure, crowded restaurant is just absurd. It's a horrendous process. And the result was equally as bad because he made this statement with the Japanese prime minister where Abe did all the talking. Trump didn't condemn the launch. He didn't mention South Korea. They didn't issue a joint statement. He kind of just made this clunky comment.
Aside from the OPSEC here, let's separate them both out, right?
What is OPSEC? What is OPSEC? You're speaking in these code words.
The operational security. Let's talk about the substance of the so let's do the substance of the response and of North Korea, because you were telling us that this scared the shit out of you.
Well, no, I mean, the operational security side, we don't know what documents they were looking at. They probably weren't waving around classified matters. It was probably they were looking at a statement. So whatever. Let's set that aside because we just don't know. On the substance, I mean, it was just, when Iran tested a missile, they sent out General Flynn to demand to put Iran on notice, right? The statement from Trump was kind of half-assed and weird, and it didn't really work. And it's just, substantively, when the North Koreans launch a missile like this, they're not just doing it for the sake of doing it. They're usually testing something that you can then apply to a future weapon system. So they're trying to get to a place where they can put a nuclear warhead on an intercontinental ballistic missile that could reach the United States. They don't currently have that capability, we don't think. The mid-range missiles they have could hit Guam, but they could certainly hit Japan or South Korea. But it's a very real threat. And this might be the biggest threat Trump faces as president. Is when they hit this threshold of a nuclear device that they can deliver on ICBM, and we're not his response was just ad hoc, and it didn't do anything to reassure our allies.
And so that's scary enough, but it's all going down in the middle of the dining room at Mar-a-Lago.
Yes, America is a wonderful country. You come here, you get a job as waiter, you get to see President of the United States doing highly, highly sensitive, classified meetings in wedding. I'm serving iceberg wedge salads, and I'm hearing incredibly interesting things. And I'm thinking, this country, man. I come here with nothing but babushka doll.
John Lovett got a job as a Russian intel agent at the Mar-a-Lago. He's a waiter now.
That's why this has been happening. Really, I'm thinking twice about having suggested this last night.
Do we think this has run its course yet?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's pretty good.
Hold on, let me switch out. Hold on, let me get John. Hey guys.
Well done. So
good job.
CNN had this story last night about what was going on at Mar-a-Lago. I mean, just reading a few things from the story. As Mar-a-Lago's wealthy members looked on from their tables and with a keyboard player crooning in the background, Trump and Abe's evening meal quickly morphed into a strategy session. The decision-making on full view to fellow diners as described in detail to CNN. The patio was lit only with candles and moonlight, so aides used the camera lights on their phones to help the stone-faced Trump and Abe read through the document.
Operational Security 101.
How's that,
Have
Tom?
your cell phone on with a light pointed at a document. That will keep it safe.
Someone said a cell phone with light on is like a portable commercial satellite truck.
Yeah. I talked to some people today. I think they were sort of
reporting.
I think they were going over the language of a possible statement or communique or joint statement or whatever it might be. That said, go somewhere else, guys. Clearly he loves being in the center of a play about him. Right? He loves this. This is the coolest thing ever to
almost
be playing
as if he was
president.
a reality television star.
Exactly.
This was it was actually breathtaking. It is. I was reading it and I was just gasping alone in my house. There's some dingus who's a member of Mar-a-Lago took a picture with the guy holding the nuclear football.
I saw that.
You have people taking photos. Regardless of whether it's classified or not, this is really sensitive. It's actually really useful information for our adversaries to see how decisions are made in real time. And I guess when I heard that Mar-a-Lago was going to be the winter White House, for me, all I heard was conflicts of interest. He's going to make money off of this. He's a scheming, grifting guy.
Yeah, it was hard to figure out what the problem was.
It never occurred to me that it was it was going to continue to be a club with events, and he'd be having Abe down after a golf tournament and some wedding where they're serving shrimp cocktails.
Right. So let's say this happened at the White House. They could have walked downstairs into the White House Situation Room. They could have had a secure video conference with the Pentagon, with our ambassador in South Korea, with anyone else we needed to in the entire world. We could have had satellite imagery up. We could have seen the telemetry of the missile in real time from the Pentagon. I mean, there's a million ways you could have known exactly what was happening faster than, Googling it or whatever they were doing on their cell phones.
Even if you were at Mar-a-Lago and this went down, right? We've all been on, you were just saying, we've all been on the road in foreign countries with the president when something of national security importance goes down, and they have these rooms called skiffs.
Yeah, you have a secure room. Basically, you take over an entire hotel room. You set up a tent so no one can monitor you via video. There's sound machines so no one can listen to the audio. You have secure communications capability. It's a great make work when you're on the road because the president needs to get his PDB. That said, he should,
But he's
go
not
to
even,
the White House, man.
But he's not even on the road.
I know.
They're clearly
He's in the United
planning.
States.
They're clearly planning to use Mar-a-Lago, which means the national security apparatus should be setting up rooms there permanently to have these conversations the same way Bush did at Crawford, when he was wrecking things.
And they may be doing that, but clearly it's not prepared. And if it was prepared, why they didn't simply retire down to that room is a mystery to me.
And just the hypocrisy of the campaign.
I know.
The campaign was about her fucking emails. I know everyone's been saying this, but it's so...
Well, there's a bigger problem with the NSC, and I don't know if you want to transition into that now, but it's gotten a lot of attention.
I want to... The one more funny part is this goes to the pay-to-play part. At one point, as this all is happening, there's a wedding at Mar-a-Lago as well, and so Trump says to the Trump wants to go see the wedding, so he takes the Japanese prime minister and he said, I said to the prime minister of Japan, I said, come on, Shinzo, let's go over and say hello. First of all, you're not really supposed to call him by his first name.
You know what? Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. Let's not worry about that part because you're getting to the best part.
Come on, Shinzo. So they go over there. He says, they've been members of this club for a long time, Trump said of the newlyweds. They've paid me a fortune.
Great. Come meet him.
It's so sad that all these foreign leaders are going to come to this country. They're going to meet with our president, and they're going to go home, and they're going to be like, guys, it's fucking nuts. And
it's as nuts as you think it is.
It's going
to be most embarrassing, like imagining the foreign leaders call each other.
Yeah,
like Abe calls Merkel and was like, "You wouldn't believe what just happened this weekend."
It's like I just hate that like Justin Trudeau is going to go home and have a bunch of really funny stories that he's telling his buddies up in Canada, and it's like, hey, don't make fun. I don't want to be on. It's America, man.
Yeah.
I don't like that your stories are about us and I'm sympathetic to them.
Well, and then the backdrop of all this is that Trump has been just demagoguing the fact that the Japanese don't pay us enough for the defense capabilities we give them, right? And then you have a population of people that are living in the fear of being nuked by a madman in North Korea, and Trump's just like putzing around at Mar-a-Lago with them. I mean, this is not a serious response to a very serious threat.
I mean, the good news here is I heard that when they went to the wedding, everyone at the wedding was very finely dressed in Indochino suits.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Indochino is one of the largest made-to-measure menswear brands, guys. You get a high-quality suit made to your exact measurements for a perfect fit, and you also get to customize your suit just the way you want it.
So let's say, you're at this wedding and you're reading over classified documents because the president left them on the table next to a shrimp cocktail. You want to look your best, so you're going to wear an Indochino suit.
You got to wear an Indochino suit.
And before the big night, you want to visit a showroom or shop online at Indochino.com. You pick from hundreds of fabrics, choose your customizations from lapels to pleats to jacket linings and more. You submit your body measurements, and then you place your order and wait for it to arrive in just 4 weeks. This week, Pod Save America listeners can get any premium Indochino suit for just $389, guys.
It's a good deal.
Think about all the incredible, interesting conversations you can overhear in an Indochino suit at the Mar-a-Lago Winter White House.
So all you have to do is go to Indochino.com and enter Crooked at checkout. That's 50% off the regular price for a made-to-measure premium suit. And shipping is free. It's Indochino.com, promo code Crooked, for any premium suit for just $389 and free shipping. Go get it today. Everything that happened at Mar-a-Lago this weekend, it's sort of a backdrop to larger issues with the National Security Council that are sort of coming to a head today. Not just with National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, who he could be fired by the time you listen to this podcast, or he could be there another 4 years. We don't know.
That's a good point.
We have jinxed things a few times, so
we have.
It'd be nice if you were fired while we were doing this.
No predictions here, but it looks like he's on thin ice, many people are saying. So the New York Times story, which is very fascinating, is called Turmoil at the National Security Council from the Top Down by David Sanger. It's based on 24 current and former National Security Council officials commenting.
I love the sourcing on these stories. Like the Washington Post had 9 people saying that Flynn had talked about sanctions with the Russians. Like they're getting you guys dead to rights.
9 sources. I think we've got it. Look, it's so funny to be like, I have 8, but I'm not that. I want to get one more.
Tommy, as a former staffer at the NSC, what were some of the most troubling things about this story for you?
I mean, what's most disconcerting to me is how disorganized the NSC sounds. Because this sounds funny, but like the National Security Council lives and dies by good process. Like paper and how it's worked and who gets to see it when is very important. They run, you run a process where hard questions are debated at lower levels. They make as many decisions as they can, then they run it up to the deputies. And then by the time it gets to the National Security Advisor or the president, things should be worked over. And you should have worked out the details of, say, banning all Muslims.
But like, tell me what the National Security Council does. Like it is a bunch of different agencies, and
the NSC, the National Security Advisor, is charged with convening all the relevant component parts of the government that do national security. So when General Flynn hosts a principals committee meeting with Steve Bannon on his right, he's got the Secretary of Defense, DOD, State Department, like the intelligence community, all the relevant players, and they come together to make these decisions. It just sounds like these meetings are not happening on a regular basis. The staff is full of career people that come over from agencies. They're really apolitical professionals. Those people are all running out of the building because they don't like the way things are run. They feel like it's being politicized. And frankly, it sounds like no one wants to work for General Flynn, who himself is probably not ready to lead this organization.
You see that people are bringing "Make America Great" mugs to national security meetings.
Yeah,
which is a small, silly point, but it's just like it's sort of like indicative of the overall feeling here. And also, like, well, the scarier point is I saw that they said that Steve Bannon is like convening a shadow national security council without some of the career experts.
Yeah, and
who knows who's in that?
This stuff was happening with Cheney, right? He was run his own shadow process, and it was a disaster. Like, a good process doesn't guarantee a good outcome, but a bad process guarantees a bad outcome. And like, you also read that there are insider threat programs going on where they're investigating people within the NSC to see if they're leaking. Meanwhile, Flynn's leaking to the Russians about sanctions relief.
And Donald Trump is using a compromised Android phone at Mar-a-Lago to make national security decisions.
It's a problem.
I was saying this last night. You know, we read the news to get ready for this podcast. At least I try to. I rely on John and Tommy to do most of the work. But reading the news last night felt like the scene in Ghostbusters where Sigourney Weaver opens the fridge and she's like, you know, I was seeing this Flynn story, and I'm like, wait a second, that's an egg cooking on the counter. And then I'm reading a little bit more of the details, and it says that Mattis almost ordered basically a war against Iran, and then kind of changed his mind at the last minute because it leaked. And then you open the fridge, and it's like, there's a fucking monster in it. It's like, there is no Obama, only Trump.
I want to talk about that point about Mattis, too, because everyone's like, Mattis is the safe one. Mattis is the one who's going to get us through the next 4 years. But Mattis was like, yeah, we were almost going to, like, go... What was
firefight with Iran.
What was going on?
It's not that bad. The Iranians ship weapons to the Houthi rebels who they're aligned with against the Saudis. This happens fairly regularly. We've interdicted a number of ships sending over this stuff. What it sounds like is he had his eye on a boat and he wanted to interdict it, which is fairly standard, but was worried, given how bad the Yemen operation had gone, that if this thing devolved into a shooting war, this could be us versus Iran, and that's like was just too much for the load to bear. Now, I don't know the details of this.
So it could have been a responsible decision then?
It sounds like it could have been a responsible decision, but it also sounds like a missed opportunity to collect intelligence and prevent a pretty nasty arms shipment from happening.
Can you walk us through why Flynn might be fired in that whole talking to the Russians thing?
Yeah, I mean, the quick and dirty is Flynn talked to Ambassador Kislyak, who's the Russian ambassador to the U.S., a number of times before the election and during the transition. When asked about this, they all said he was discussing logistics for a call, and they denied that he ever discussed sanctions and that there were discussions during the campaign. Mike Pence, in particular, went out and really put his credibility on the line defending Flynn. Now, thanks to the Washington Post and their 9 sources, we know that those who had access to intelligence reports that monitor those communications between Ambassador Kislyak and whomever he's talking to, in this case it was Flynn, said he did mention election-related sanctions. So it's clear Flynn lied not just to the country, but to his own team. And yesterday on the Sunday shows, the little, elven conservative warrior they sent out, Stephen Miller, wouldn't defend
we'll get to him.
Flynn. And he was like, I don't have any information for you on that. And then you wake up this morning and there's 3 newspapers saying that Trump's upset with him and he might be done. So Flynn has lost credibility. People didn't think he was up for the job to begin with. He seems like he's cooked.
Flynn, man. Anyway, he sucks. He just doesn't seem smart enough.
Good point. Well, the question is, too, the other one is...
I almost had a really bad spit take on that.
I saw people wondering if Trump knew that Flynn was talking about sanctions to the Russian ambassador. And that's the one reason that maybe Flynn doesn't get fired here.
Interesting. Stay woke.
Because they won't say either way. Because Trump basically said, I don't know. Trump was asked about this on the plane to Mar-a-Lago by reporters, and he said, I don't know what you're talking about. I'll look into the story.
Total lie.
Of course, lie. He knew.
This is true in like any profession. It's true of executives in Hollywood. You can either be stupid or you can be an asshole. But you can't be both.
I feel like I know plenty of stupid assholes now.
Yeah, they don't do that well.
Yeah. But I mean, I think the question for Flynn, there's a law called the Logan Act, which, people are talking about whether it's relevant here because you're not supposed to have these contacts with foreign officials. That's probably not going to be enforceable or enforced. The question is, did someone come to him and did he lie to an investigator in the process of these conversations? Did he lie to his own team and lose credibility? I mean, seemingly he's lost the entire national security apparatus of the government. So I don't know how he could stay in that job.
Couple other tidbits in the New York Times story.
There's so much happening.
Yeah, I want to go through a few more. And while Mr. Obama liked policy option papers that were 3 to 6 single-spaced pages, council staff members are now being told to keep papers to a single page with lots of graphics and maps. Quote, "The president likes maps," said one official.
So I remember vaguely similar stories about Bush, about how he liked the things to be one page. But I got to tell you, I don't think it should be one page, including illustrations.
9 bullets.
I mean,
was,
listen,
was
we
the max.
all been up late the night before a term paper was due, and all of a sudden 10 pages becomes 12 pages because you added a couple pictures.
Is Trump a geography buff?
I don't know. Now, I'll give credit to our Intel Community and Defense Department. They can produce some pretty cool maps, okay? There's some cool stuff you can see visually from these guys. But how about the basic information as well as the maps?
In fairness, though, these are a lot of countries Trump is finding out about for the first time. I mean, he really doesn't know anything, so it is fair that, like, you should start with the basics.
Come on, Shinzo, we're going to go bomb this one.
Now, Shinzo, you come from the
Show me your country. Show me
the bunch of islands, but not the Philippines. That's a different thing. It's a different bunch of islands, Shinzo. Also, by the way, just like a small thing, he had recently talked to the president of China, so he thought that Japanese names were organized the same way that Chinese names were. So in one tweet, he goes, "It was great meeting with President Shinzo," instead of saying President Abe.
I did not notice that. You notice the Chinese media has taken to calling him a paper tiger in print and mocking him with like BuzzFeed-style quizzes about why he's weak.
Also,
so that's not going well either.
RT is starting to mock him. They're starting to run Saturday Night Live clips.
Well, you know, it was only a matter of time till Putin, that worm turned.
Right, because Putin's main goal is not to be buddies with Trump; it's to destabilize the United States.
And
right?
whatever. And look, we here at Crooked Media cannot confirm the contents of the dossier. But that's all I'll say about that.
Okay, cool. The other part, this goes back to Bannon setting up the Shadow Council. There was a quote in the story. For his part, Mr. Bannon sees the United States as headed toward an inevitable confrontation with two adversaries, China and Iran. I mean, Jesus Christ, that might have been the scariest part of the whole story.
I was agog.
Because this is the guy running national security, essentially, because Flynn's out there, like, doing whatever and, probably going to be fired.
In Flynn's book, he compares himself to Machiavelli and Steve Jobs.
Jesus.
Think different, Michael Flynn. One way he's thinking different is talking to the Russians about national security matters.
Another way he's thinking different is apparently he was surprised to know that you couldn't just like ship more arms to Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
So I got to tell you, like, this story is incredible, but there are parts of the story I'm like, all right, that's the part that every administration goes through, learning the different parts of the levers of the government. I'm like,
I don't know that a 3-star general who ran the Defense Intelligence Agency
yeah,
should know that
he was the head of the DNI, man.
I was trying to find one thing, but he's terrible.
No, I mean, look, that's one of those things that could be a garble and someone treating him unfairly. Yeah. But boy, yes, there's some pretty well-established procedures for how these things get done.
How about Katie McFarland in a national security meeting saying that we need to make America great again?
And that was like an all-hands, all-staff. And those are the people that are all career staffers who don't want to hear that kind of stuff.
Can you imagine people with their notebooks like, I got to take notes in this meeting, and she's like, make America great again. Okay, let me write that down.
She is not up for that job. That is an incredibly hard job. But like the anecdote that shocked me, or that made me laugh really, was her giving people like the wrap it up, like Oscars style thing at NSC meetings.
I like that. I mean, I think that's a great idea.
Those meetings are way too long.
People talk way too long in meetings. Let's wrap it up.
You should.
I give love at that sign every once in a while during the podcast.
Guys, it hurts my feelings. You guys, I don't think you all realize how often my feelings are hurt while recording the podcast.
Are we gonna sit down on the couch again?
But the other thing, I would say that the saddest part of the story, the most pitiable part of the story, is when there's a bunch of national security officials are having a conversation about whether or not they should start writing draft tweets.
In
the hopes of getting them to Trump and maybe influencing.
But that's my point about like there's not serious meetings going on with a process that are leading to decisions and policy ideas. It's the NSC's getting together to like write tweets. That is not a good use of time.
You see, it's like these staffers who are not political, who are just there for years and years, just like not knowing what to do. And like these are such dedicated people. Like they are serious, They got their pleated pants, and they do their best, and they love this country, and they really, really care, and they are not funny because I tried making jokes, and it doesn't work. And I feel bad because I just know how deeply they want to do a good job for the administration, and they're not given the ability to do it because they're monsters.
I think some of them are funny. Aside from
some of them are funny.
Aside from the New York Times story, there's also, by the way, that Observer story that said that the intel community is withholding information from Trump because they're worried that the Russians might find out. And the senior DOD official says the Russians are probably in the sit room.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of that.
Do you think?
I'm worried that they think that. I'm equally as worried if the rogue National Security Agency is deciding that they don't have to give the President of the United States the information they're collecting. Like, that too is not acceptable. That is coup light.
Well, at the same, this is
listen.
A lot
these
of bad
guys
options
always
here.
support. There will always be things where the CIA is not going to the president every time and saying we pay off Bob Smith in this government to get this. Like, they don't. There's a need to know for some of these things, but. The goal of intelligence is to help you make a better decision, and they need to give him everything he needs to make good decisions.
Yeah. So Flynn's on the ropes, possibly, but apparently he's not the only one. Our friend Reince Priebus is in a little bit of trouble. The guy that runs.
Can I?
Want to do this? Newsmax,
I'll do
Ruddy.
this because this gave me such joy, Schadenfreude, if you will.
Yes, yeah.
So
is that a Russian word? Just kidding.
So Trump gets a Friday night drink. Well, Trump has a soda, and this guy, the head of Newsmax, Chris Ruddy, who's his old friend, they have a 30-minute jam sesh. And then, of course, Chris Ruddy goes to Twitter. He goes like, just had which is just so pathetic. But he goes to Twitter and he's like, just had a 30-minute conversation with President Donald Trump. He's got this thing in hand. That's like legitimately what he said. Okay, so they have a 30-minute conversation. Then all of a sudden, over the next 2 days, Chris Ruddy takes to the streets telling anybody who will listen, Reince Priebus has to go. Reince Priebus is dropping the ball. It's all Reince Priebus' fault. He's the one who failed on the executive order. He's the one who can't wrangle process. He can't tell the president, no, he's not up to this job. Reince must go. Reince must go. Now, I don't know about you, but that does not seem like a coincidence to me.
No.
It seems as though Trump spent time with Chris Ruddy to give him this. Look, we don't know what that conversation was, but Chris Ruddy clearly came away from that conversation saying, it's my job to go on television and make Reince Priebus look terrible.
Yeah. The only bit of context I'd add here is that Newsmax was doing fake news before fake news was cool. Like, they are garbage.
Oh, yeah.
But, clearly this guy has access.
But there was also that Politico story that said that Trump was a little annoyed with Reince, and also, of course, our boy Sean Spicer. So Flynn, Priebus, Spicer. The Politico story also interestingly said that the only people that Trump really likes are Bannon and Gary Cohn because they've made a lot of money.
Amazing. Yeah. Best anecdote.
And Gary Cohn is like one of the people rumored to be possible chief of staff, if you know.
Well, and Gary Cohn is a Democrat, but he's also the former...
Unless he's murdered in the middle of the night by Kellyanne Conway.
Former president of Goldman Sachs, Gary Cohn, is now like the most important person in making economic policy. I cannot tell you how satisfying it is to watch Reince Priebus be raked over the coals. Not the first person to make a deal with Donald Trump and then be ruined by it.
So for all these Trump staffers who aren't sleeping well at night because you're worried that you might wake up the next day and find out in a tweet from the president that you're no longer working at the White House, may we suggest to get a better night's sleep, Parachute? Some great sheets. So yeah, one of our new sponsors, Pod Save America, is Parachute. Parachute makes modern bedding for a more comfortable home, and their 60-night trial means that you can test run your sheets for 2 whole months. And this is a social good thing. If you don't love your new bedding, send it back, no questions asked, and they donate these returns to Habitat for Humanity. Tommy, you've recently...
Yeah. After a week on the road, I came home to my brand new Parachute seats, and I got the linen ones. I have to tell you, these things are incredible. It was like the most comfortable night's sleep I have had in, I can't even tell you how long. Like, they are... I didn't expect linen sheets to be better, but they are. They're just like cool and comfortable and awesome sheets.
So maybe if like Sean Spicer had a set of Parachute sheets, he wouldn't need a Unisom to escape the grim reality of his life.
Can Sean use the sheets as an actual parachute?
When
he is tossed out of Air Force One.
Because honestly, Sean closing his eyes and trying to fantasize about another life is just not working anymore. There's nothing that is helping him get to sleep. He is so caffeinated. He is so broken the only thing that could help him is just a soft set of parachute sheets.
To get some, visit parachutehome.com/crooked to get free shipping and returns on Parachute's comfy bedding.
Have you made a deal with the devil and you're having trouble sleeping?
Again, visit parachute.com/crooked to get free shipping and returns.
They are awesome sheets. Seriously.
One person who is not worried about his job in the White House is 31-year-old senior advisor on policy and top speechwriter Stephen Miller. This guy is quite a fucking character, let me tell you.
It's so dark.
A native of Santa Monica, right here in Los Angeles, went to, like, Stephen Miller's, if you look at his whole backstory, it is like such a story of like conservative oppression. This kid was so oppressed at liberal Santa Monica High School because he had to go to school with Latinos and Asians.
Right.
And not everyone was speaking English all the time. So he decided to mock them.
Yeah, he had trouble making friends because of his ideology. Yeah, sure, Steve.
He ran for student government president and was booed off stage by 4,000 people. That's all you have to know. And apparently he relishes it. Like when people don't like him, he likes it, which is sort of a.
You know what this reminds me of actually a lot is Ted Cruz, which is
exactly.
It takes a lot to be the kind of person so despised at every stage of your life that at every stage of your life, all these people emerge to say, "I knew Steve, and he's the worst." And you get this sense that this is just a giant bit of payback to all the people who said he wasn't cool, who didn't want to dance with him. I don't know, but he is.
He's like, "I'll show you. I'm going to go be a nationalist."
He came to prominence during the campaign because he would give an entire speech as a warm up to the Trump speech, and he clearly adopted the language of Trump because he says things like, "The powers of the president will not be questioned," which is just eye-rolling Trumpian bluster.
But that was,
guess what, buddy? We're questioning it.
And
protesters are questioning it.
Yeah,
the
we should say
courts are
about this.
questioning
He
it.
was on the Sunday shows. He was on all the Sunday shows Sunday, which is why we're talking about him. And it was like the craziest performance ever because he just the lies were
just lying.
I used to think Kellyanne Conway was the best liar of the whole administration. Not the best liar, but the most joyful liar. Like, she enjoyed telling the lies, right? She says them with like a straight face. Miller's giving her a run for her money because what he was saying about voter fraud was, he didn't just say the lie. He then said, and you know I'm right, George, and it is an indisputable fact, and I will go on any show anytime to repeat these claims. Blah, blah. Well, you know what? Stephen Miller should come on this show. We'll be happy to talk about voter fraud with him.
Come on, buddy.
We are happy to talk to you about voter fraud because
welcome.
everything you said was a fucking lie.
And the thing is also, like, at least with Kellyanne Conway, like, there's some pathos. Like, you can see that it's wearing on her. She's constantly talking about how aggrieved she is. There's a real kind of sense of fear in her eyes. Stephen Miller has some dead eyes up there. And it's also really strange to hear this kind of nationalistic Breitbart language with a Santa Monica, California accent. Like, we're going to stop voter fraud. The president will not be questioned.
One of their favorite new things is saying that thousands of people were bused from Massachusetts to New Hampshire, and that changed the result there. Someone tweeted that there were 800 legal observers in New Hampshire, 6,000 election workers. The AG's office looked into it. There were cops. There was not a single report of buses or voter fraud. And the reason this is important, guys, is because these kind of allegations are setting up voter suppression efforts that we need to watch going forward because they're going to try to use them to win more elections.
And just one more fact, too. I believe Donald Trump could question the results of New Hampshire. He could have done it for like $500. You could have filed a report on these. And so could have, what's her name? The Republican who lost to Hassan.
Stephen Miller.
Hassan.
Stephen Miller said, anyone involved in New Hampshire politics knows this is a problem. Immediately afterwards, the former Republican Attorney General, state GOP chair, all these Republican politicians in New Hampshire said, absolutely, voter fraud has not been a problem here. Republican politicians. And he said anyone would tell you it's a problem. No one would tell you it's a problem. Yeah. Also, he has this whole thing where he said it is an indisputable fact that 14% of non-citizens are registered to vote in this country. That is completely false. The people whose study he referred to has said that's false. They wrote the study. And he was so sure that it's true. It is not true.
These people are such bad people. We're just like, this guy should not be in the White House.
I sort of wish that some of the Sunday show hosts were armed with a few more of these facts on voter fraud because, I mean, at some point you can't have you only have 10 minutes with him, so you can't keep going.
They were pretty, I watched the
George was angry. George was very angry.
He didn't have, but he said something, you provide the evidence, and of course Stephen Miller has no evidence because there is no evidence. Yeah, man. I mean, it's just we're
Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller's on the rise.
All the worst people are just empowered. It is really bad.
Yeah, and Trump loves him now because he's willing to lie for him.
One more thing. One more Republican to complain about outside the administration before we get to our guest.
I don't even know what this is.
This is Jason Chaffetz.
Oh, God.
So the town halls are going very well.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, guys, next week is recess, congressional recess. We'll probably give you some more information because it's going to be very important to get to all of your congresspersons' town halls. In fact, someone on Laura Olin on Twitter, who had worked on the Obama campaign at some point, she had a good suggestion, which is that if your representatives don't hold a town hall next week, you should hold one yourself.
I love that.
Invite them, make it public, gather a crowd, take some photos. Like, it's a good idea because there are going to be. We were looking around here next week, and there's some, like, the Republicans around here have already had their town halls.
Yeah, sorry, Daryl. I said you're not going
Daryl,
to see our
been
shiny
great.
faces.
But if your representative's not holding a town hall, you should just hold one yourself. So there's these town halls are happening, and in places like Utah, where Jason Chaffetz represents Utah's 3rd district, he goes to his town hall and he is overwhelmed with people there who were just, complaining about him wanting to repeal the Affordable Care Act, complaining about him not investigating Trump, even though he's the head of the Oversight Committee. And so Chaffetz is interviewed, and he says, this was more of a paid attempt to bully and intimidate me rather than a true showcase of how voters felt in his district. He called them paid protesters. Then you look at some of the videos, and it's like a 10-year-old girl.
I watched this thing, and like, the people raised their hand and said, "Hi, my name is Sarah, and I just want you to know I am not a paid protester. I am a constituent, and I'm here to talk to you." This was as rough and tumble and real as it gets. I mean, these were not. The paid protester thing is so stupid.
It's so stupid, but it's also so sinister. It's like these people take time out of their day to come to a town hall and talk to their representative about what bothers them, and then he's too much of a coward to tell them that they're paid protesters to their face. He goes to the press afterwards and tells the world that these people who took time out of their day to go see him are being paid money to do so.
He goes to In-N-Out with a Washington Post reporter, and he rags on his constituents as some big DC media.
Five Guys.
And actually, I will
Five
say,
Guys.
and also, it was especially disappointing because I have to say, watching Chaffetz up there, he really did take a lot of questions. He talked to a lot of people who opposed him. Like, he did actually, I think, handle it the way I think a congressperson should handle it. I mean, just to give him credit for 1 second, and then to turn around and say none of it was real is ridiculous.
Don't you think that Evan McMullin should run against Jason Chaffetz?
Yep.
Yes, Evan, friend of the pod,
Do it.
get in there.
So it was said in that longer Washington Post story that you referenced, Tommy, that Chaffetz was thinking in 2020 he might run for governor. You should, fine.
Evan,
McMullin should go do it then.
Utah, it's yours.
Jason
Take
Chaffetz is sort of a dangerous person to have in a leadership position because he just won't do anything to put any real oversight on Trump.
Yeah, I mean,
That's his job.
like
That's
I think
his job.
it's actually
Supposed to investigate.
We should step back from this for a second because what we're seeing at Mar-a-Lago is so galling and so breathtaking. All these violations that the Trump administration is doing. You see more and more stories about his sons continuing to go off to foreign countries to make deals. All of it is happening, and it's exasperating. But we should remember why it's exasperating. It's exasperating because Donald Trump, who has spent his whole life living without consequence, now is a president without consequence because the Republicans have abdicated their responsibility to just hold a fucking hearing.
Yeah.
God damn it.
It matters.
It matters. Okay, when we come back, we will talk to someone who has been at the center of an organizing movement over the last couple of years, DeRay McKesson.
This is Pod Save America. Stick around. There's more great show coming your way.
Pod Save America is brought to you, as always, by SeatGeek, the first place we go to look for tickets to a game or a concert. We all have the SeatGeek app on our phone, right, guys?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Perfect. And have we...
Why'd you say that like it was an accusation?
I just want to make sure. We got to get the cash app. We got to get the SeatGeek app. All right, good.
I got all the apps.
I used it to
Perfect.
see Chance the Rapper a while back.
Oh, there you go.
He won a Grammy.
He's the best. The best.
And SeatGeek does all the price comparison for you by searching multiple ticket sites and ensuring that you get the best possible deal. And you save all the time and money. Best of all, as usual, the Pod Save America listeners get $20 off their first SeatGeek purchase. You get a rebate right to you. So, to get your $20 rebate on tickets, you've got to download the SeatGeek app. You got to go to the settings tab and click add a promo code. The promo code is...
It's crooked, guys.
It's crooked.
Here's the thing. You're on Twitter. You're reading about the news. It makes you want to die. Click over to the SeatGeek app. Check out something to entertain yourself.
Yeah,
distract yourself.
Get
That's what
away.
the world ends.
Get away from...
North Korea has ICBMs now.
Go to a concert.
Diversions.
Enter promo code crooked, and you'll get $20 off after you've made your first ticket purchase. Again, download the SeatGeek app and enter promo code crooked
Use
today.
our sponsors.
On Pod Save America today, we have civil rights activist DeRay McKesson. DeRay, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's good to be here.
Good to have you. So we were just talking about protests and organizing. We were talking about some of the town halls. You obviously have a ton of experience with this. You were one of the leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement. So I think BLM was extremely successful in changing the conversation about race and police violence in America, particularly raising awareness. What are some of the lessons you learned from the movement that you think could apply to the resistance today?
Yeah, so many things. So the first thing is that I think about protests is this idea of telling the truth in public. That what we did with our bodies is that we told the truth that Mike and Rakia and Ayanna and so many people should be alive, that we disrupted board meetings and commissions, so the truth that they weren't using their institutional power in ways that benefited the lives of people of color. And I think what we've seen spread across the country, not only for the past 2 years, but definitely since January 20th, is even more people willing to tell the truth in public, like to put their bodies on the line and to see that as like a valuable thing. It is sort of interesting that 2 years ago, it was not cool to be a protester, right? It was like,
right.
I remember people who loved us as people were like, this is not the right way to do it. And now it's like everybody's a protester, which is, I think, good for democracy. Interesting to look back on. The second thing is that we aren't born woke, but something wakes us up. And I'm mindful that, like, for some people, it really is like a tweet or a poster or a Facebook post or like that random conversation. And it reminds me that, like, it's sometimes the small stuff that, like, helps people understand that they have a stake in this. And like you said, I think for 2 years we were fighting the awareness battle, that we're trying to convince people that there was a problem. People didn't believe that the police in 2016 killed 3 people a day. Like, they just didn't believe it. And we won the awareness battle. I think that after the awareness part of the work comes the deep organizing. Like, can we build an infrastructure that allows us to capture the energy that's out there? I think that that's where we are writ large right now.
And you talked about you need something to sort of wake you up. You weren't born a protester. You didn't do it your whole life. You were working in schools. You were working in the Minneapolis public schools. And what was it that made you get in a car and drive to Ferguson in 2014? What was sort of your moment?
Yeah, I was a teacher, so I taught 6th grade math in East New York, Brooklyn, and worked at the Harlem Children's Zone, opened up an after-school center in Baltimore. So kids and like the work of equity in education was always really central to my heart. And I was in Minneapolis. It was August 16th. Mike got killed on August 9th. It was August 16th. I was sitting on my couch. It was 1 o'clock in the morning, and I saw the protest on CNN, and I saw what was happening on Twitter, and they were telling 2 different stories. And there was something about it that I was like, I want to go. I want to see for myself. So I waited till my best friend woke up. He lived in Chicago with his wife, and I called at like 7:59. It was like, hey, Donnie, I think I'm going to go to St. Louis. What do you think? He was like, if you think you should go, you should go. So I got in the car, drove 9 hours, ended up in St. Louis, had 800 followers on Twitter, didn't know anybody. And that was my story. And if anything, I felt called at the very least to be a witness, to just see for myself. And when I got there, the second night I was in St. Louis was the first night of the curfew. It was also the first time that I got tear gassed. And it was in that moment that I was like, this is not the America I know, and I'll do whatever I can to fight back. And joined so many incredible people who were willing to put everything we had on the line to not be silent.
So in the past few weeks, I think we've seen an incredible growth in protest and a new spirit of protest for a lot of people who've never done it before. And that's really incredible and inspiring. And I think it's done a great job of kind of wresting the microphone away from Donald Trump. However, in some of these protests, as with any giant group of people, you've seen, an occasional trash can get set on fire and all of a sudden there are 200 reporters around it. I know that the Black Lives Matter movement has dealt with this problem, these masses of very peaceful protesters then being maligned on places like Fox News, but it all spreads outward from there to the more mainstream press. How do you control the message? How do you make sure that it's being treated fairly and not being kind of maligned by a small segment of a protest?
Well, frankly, it's a little different now, right? Because there's so many white people that are protesting that it is like a whole different narrative around what force looks like and what violence looks like. But I'm mindful that people shouldn't have to protest, right? That people shouldn't have to be at airports. They shouldn't have to be in the middle of the street. That people are outside because a wrong has occurred, and this is a response to it. So the way people's anger manifests, I can't manage. I know how I encourage people to be out in the street, but I don't have to condone it to understand it. I think about, in Baltimore, I think about Ferguson, so many cities where things didn't go as some people had hoped. I understand where the anger and pain came from, and I'm mindful that people shouldn't have to be in the middle of the street. I'm also mindful that protest is like just one way to build power, right? Protest is not the answer. Just like voting is not the answer. Just like phone calls are not the single answer. There is no one answer. That this has to be a conversation about how do we have as many tools in the toolkit to build power. And I think that is what I'm hopeful comes next. That the awareness battles after the awareness battles where movements die, right? They change the conversation. Everybody starts to sort of see the world differently, and people think that is victory. And victory really is a combination of how do we change systems and structures, right? So how do we make sure there's equity built into systems and structures, and then how do we change minds? And I think that is the challenge. As all of you know, as organizers in some way are working for one of the best organizers we've had recently, is that the biggest organizing infrastructure exists around elections, right? It's around charismatic people. On the left, we don't have deep organizing infrastructure that's sustainable across the country that's not used in election cycles. So it'll be interesting to see if we can build that now. Can we build a network of canvassers and phone banks and trainings and stuff like that at scale that will actually become a home for all the energy that's out there right now?
So to that point, in 2016, you ran for mayor of Baltimore, and I'm wondering what you learned about exactly that, about translating protests and awareness into electoral support or not, and what things you felt worked well, and what things, we have some work to do to get those institutions in place.
Yeah, concrete. We raised a lot of money online, so I did no call time, which was, the first fundraising person we hired quick.
The worst.
She was like, I'll never work for somebody who does no call time. And we raised $300,000 in 70 days. It was dope, and we did a lot online, and so that was great. So it made me a believer that, if you figure out the right message, that people can fund these things, mm-hmm. right? There's this myth that, you'll never raise money, and I think that was shattered for me. The second, though, is that there's nothing that can replace, getting in front of real people. So we did a lot of home, house parties. Mm-hmm. So people would DM me and be like, hey, DeRay, if I get 40 people in my living room, will you come? And we did it in all different neighborhoods in the city. And that type of organizing infrastructure is incredible. But again, it only exists around sort of election cycles. So how do we build that when it's necessary, but there's not an election coming up, I think is interesting. And then it's the nuts and bolts, no poll can replace the importance of knocking on doors and those sort of just nuts and bolts sort of things that we did well, that I think I didn't appreciate as much until the end of the campaign. That I did a lot of community forums, which were fine, but they were a lot of decideds, right? People were only coming to community forums who absolutely knew who they were going to vote for. That I would have done a lot more sort of talks in living rooms and door knocking at the beginning of the campaign that I didn't do. And the last thing is that people are not used to actually hearing solutions. That we've been tricked to believe that repeating the problem is actually a solution. So you'll be like, what are you going to do about schools? And people will be like, schools are so bad. And people are like, yes. And you're like, well, that wasn't an answer, right? That was not an answer. But people are used to that cycle, and I didn't realize that until I had to sit on a million panels and literally heard people be like, schools are bad. And you're like, that wasn't an answer.
Yeah.
But people are just so used to that.
Did you have to deal at all with, the interesting thing about the transition between protesting into politics, and specifically electoral politics, is that politics necessarily requires compromise, right? And then as you start making those compromises to be in elected office and to be part of the system, then there are people from your organizing and protest days who will say, oh, you're selling out now, right? Because you made this compromise. How did you deal with sort of that challenge, right? Between protest and electoral politics?
Yeah, it was hard at the beginning, right? I think that one of the things that I came to appreciate at the end was that this quest for purity will always lead you astray, right? That there's no way, this ideological purity that people try to have is just impossible. So I think about on the campaign, people would be like, DeRay, you've not done anything in Baltimore. And it's I don't know. I literally don't know what else I could do, right? It's I opened up an after-school program. I was a community organizer when I was 15. I trained a third of all the teachers in the school system for 2 years. But it didn't matter to people. It was if they did not personally see me on their block, I was never an organizer. You're okay, that is crazy, right? That's wild. Or there were people who just I think about one of my biggest contentions with the Hillary-Bernie battle that happened this last election is that people forgot that we live in a world of real choices, right? That we don't live in the world of ideological purity. We live in a world of real choices. And like the false equivalencies that happened around that campaign were really hard. And I came out supporting Hillary in the end, and people were like, "You sell out," and you're like, "Well, I don't know what. One of these two people is probably going to be president. I prefer this one over the other one. She's not perfect, but like you were willing to sacrifice everybody on the stake of like she's not perfect, and like that is just a wild thing to live in. So I'm not willing to sacrifice real people's lives for this mythical ideological purity."
Right, and these differences become magnified through the media and through social media too, right?
Yeah.
When that's what we always say here. It's like there are real differences between these candidates. I mean, we were talking about this at our live show in Brooklyn on Friday with the DNC candidates, right? Like, I think that sometimes the differences between these candidates are magnified in a way that it's like, yeah, they're all progressive. They'd all be really great.
Right, like people saying like if Tom Perez wins, the Democratic Party is done, or if Keith Ellison wins, the Democratic Party is too far to left. It's like, guys, they're not that different.
Right.
Right. No, not at all. And I was just with both of them. And the Pete, I don't know how to say his last name. Pete.
Buttigieg. We learned it.
Mayor Pete.
I practiced it 20 times before we interviewed him.
Buttigieg. I like him. I had never heard him talk before.
Got to tell you, there is a groundswell on Pod Save America for a mayor named Pete Buttigieg.
Yeah, he was like really. I had a one-on-one with him. I was like, I like this guy. But yeah, people, the Tom McKee thing. You're like, guys, this is not. But people are like, people are in my mentions when I tweeted this picture of me and Tom, and they're like, "You fraud! I can't believe you sold out. He's neoliberal." It's like I don't think you even know what neoliberal means.
I
think you're just like using words.
Dre, you said something earlier that was interesting to me, which was how do you get people to believe something so awful like 3 police shootings a day that they just don't want to believe? And I feel like the Hillary campaign faced a similar issue. It was like no one could believe that our election was actually hacked by the Russians. It was just too bad to believe. And there's this like major obstacle to getting people to come to terms with these things. I'm wondering,
or just how bad Trump is now.
Yeah, or what did you learn about how to break through that barrier?
Yeah, I think that one of the things I'm sensitive to is that I think the left gets seduced into this notion that the best idea wins. And I think what is probably more true is that the idea that gets beat into people's head the most wins. Mm-hmm. And I think that what was potentially easier for us because the police were literally killing people. So it was like, hey, do you see that person who, like, they killed? We're just, like, repeating simple truths over and over and over again. And I think that helped. And also reminding people that this is like your grocery store, right? That person got killed at your grocery store, and that person got killed at your gas station. And like this idea that the trauma is actually really close to you, whether you see it or not, right? That it's coming, that it's there. I think that in this current landscape, that's what the right does really well, right? Simple messages, like it's not, death panels is not a very complex idea. It's a simple message. And they just repeat it over and over and over. And then the left, what the left does is like, tries to add nuance, and the challenge with nuance is while it might be factually true, it's just hard to repeat over and over. So if your response to death panels is like, well, Section 3000 of like the Affordable Care Act doesn't actually reference that, like nobody nobody's listening to
you
that.
Lost.
And I think that we haven't figured out how to like just distill these simple messages. And with Hillary, I think that one of the big sort of missed opportunities of her campaign was that there was no real surrogate. So you think about like Katrina Pearson. We all know Katrina, right? Like bullet necklace and all. We remember her on the news. Yeah. And you think about Killer Mike with Bernie. It's like there's a section of America who didn't know who Killer Mike was before he became sort of a stump guy for Bernie, and he was really effective. And it's like, well, who was stumping for Hillary? I don't really know. Like, I don't know who was talking about her $100 billion economic investment plan in low-income communities, or her plan to undo the crime bill, or the nuances of the way she wanted to deal with police. Like, I don't know who was saying that.
Is there anyone you see out there right now, a Democrat, that you think is speaking in that kind of clear, simple way that really drives home the point of, what our policies will do that are better than the Republicans, what Trump is doing wrong, that sort of speaks in that way that's not about persuasion, but about hammering a point home?
You're trying to get me in trouble.
No, I'm not. I'm not. You don't have to answer. You're free to say whatever you want here. This is just a place where we can have a conversation. It's a delight.
I think that the normal cast of truth tellers is like Warren, Booker. I've heard a lot that like Kamala Harris is starting to like use our voice in powerful ways, given that she's new. But I don't know if we have the person yet, right? Like the person.
Yeah, I don't think we do. I mean, I haven't seen it.
I'm sitting right here, guys.
A lot of things with him.
I mean, you are the speechwriter. You guys are the communications guys. So, yeah, I don't think we have it yet. I think we might be close. People are still really timid. I fear that the Democrats might take the high road to oblivion, right? That we might handshake, high five, and wait for the next go round, and then not exist in 2 and 4 years. Whereas the Republicans are just really dogged, right? They're like, we don't believe this. They're willing to shut down the whole government, and we're like, we're going to let this nominee go because it might fight for the next one. Whereas the Republicans are sort of like, no, we're going to shut down everything. Yep. And I'm interested to see who's going to show up to the fight on our side.
DeRay, last question, then we'll let you go. Tell us a little bit about resistancemanual.org that you put together, which is a little manual to sort of help in the resistance against Trump and other things.
Yeah, so it started with this core belief that people need to know information before they take action, right? So it's this get informed, get organized, and then take action. So we built a Wikipedia site that literally just logs every single thing about the Trump administration, all the plans, the people, ways to get involved locally, readings that you can do about race and equity, so that people can be informed. One of the things that people would ask over the past few years is what can I read, what can I do? And there was just no good repository for that, so we tried to build one. So the resistancemanual.org is that place, and it's a wiki site. So if other people have things they need to add to it about immigration or about Obamacare or about any issue about what Trump's doing with the disability community, all of those things can be housed there, and we built it for that. So that is just one of the projects that we plan to roll out. But I'm sensitive to, people should only take action when they understand. And how do we build mechanisms and spaces that allow people to understand really complex information simply and quickly? And that's what the Resistance Manual aims to do.
Awesome. Well, everyone go check it out. And DeRay, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, you're really good at this. You should do it more.
Good to talk. Bye, y'all.
Take care, DeRay. Bye. If you enjoyed this episode of Pod Save America, there are other great new and archived episodes you should go check out. Subscribe via iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks again to our sponsors. Please support them the way they support this podcast. And also, check out Tommy Vitor's podcast, Pod Save the World. Subscribe to that one and don't miss a new episode of Pod Save the World every Wednesday. Thank you very much for joining the pod, and take care.